NASA is preparing to launch the first ever mission to touch the sun. The Parker solar probe should launch on Saturday, travelling directly into the sun's atmosphere, closer to the surface than any spacecraft before it. Now, this craft is about the size of a small car, but there are a lot of hopes travelling with it for the closest ever view of our strange and mysterious star. People are very excited about this first mission into the sun's atmosphere. One of them is our own picture producer and space enthusiast, David Payne. We were talking in the newsroom earlier about this story, and you revealed that you've invested in a way in this probe. What have you done, David?
Well, basically, my name and the names of my children and my wife will be encoded on a microchip that's travelling with this probe. It was back in March that NASA opened a website for registration. Over 1.1 million people worldwide have submitted their names. It's not the first time they've done this. Our names have been on the first Orion test flight. They're currently en route to Mars on the InSight lander. But I just think it's a fabulous thing to get the public aware and more engaged, and certainly from the point of view of my own family, to get the children interested in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And it seems to have paid off. They have a keen interest. We regular stargazers. We have a fairly reasonable telescope. And I think that, you know, it's important to catch them at an early age.
And so it's part of your lives, your family lives, to go outside and be aware of where you are on our Earth and what you're looking at.
Most definitely. I mean, you know, they moaned about it, I think, the first time I set the alarm really early in the morning to see the space station going over. But they really wowed when a few seconds later, 30 seconds later, we saw one of the unmanned resupply craft going over, which is the whole reason I got them out there. My son, when he was 6 years old, from his bedroom window, we saw the Space Shuttle Discovery in orbit, close to the space station, traversing across the southern sky. And you know, to say to small children, there's a spacecraft, you know, people have got into space, we've got equipment into space, I think it's an amazing thing. And for this particular probe, the science is incredible, and the technology to get us to the point where we can start gathering science is just remarkable.
David, I took my son to see the last nighttime launch of a US space shuttle, and I couldn't quite explain why, other than we can do it and it's there. You're a lot more articulate than I am about why, especially when you're young and thinking about your place in the world, you should be looking out and up.
Yes, I think that's true. I mean, the first time I showed my children the Great Nebula in Orion, it's 1,350 light years away. You could see their minds trying to get a grasp of that distance, the fact that, you know, a new star could be born, but we won't know about it for hundreds of years, even if it's been there for 1,000 years. Just to open the idea that it's not the immediate world around them, that there's more out there, and they should be getting inquisitive about it and let their curiosity take in whatever direction they see fit.
Well, David, that is a great start for your children and a great start for our sequence as well. We're going to talk a little bit more in a minute about what's on this probe and what it might be able to do. But thank you very much for coming into the studio. You might be wondering why the probe is named Parker. Well, that's for solar astrophysicist Eugene Parker, who's 91 years old. And what a spacecraft to carry his name. This is a spacecraft that boasts a really impressive list of tech specifications. Zooming through space in a highly elliptical orbit, the Parker solar probe will reach speeds up to 430,000 miles per hour. That's 692,000 kilometers an hour, fast enough to get from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. in a second. It'll set the record for the fastest spacecraft in history. During its mission lifetime of just under 7 years, the Parker solar probe is expected to complete 24 orbits of the sun, reaching within 3.8 million miles of the sun's surface at its closest approach. Well, we're now going to talk about this with two more space science experts. Lucie Green is a professor of physics at University College London, and she's been studying the atmosphere of sun. Lucie joins us now from Perth, and here with me in the studio we've now brought in Professor Tim Horbury from Imperial College London. Tim's a principal investigator on the European Space Agency project to launch its own mission to the Sun. This isn't a competitor, Tim, is it? It kind of coordinates or will coordinate with the probe they're hoping to launch tomorrow.
That's exactly right. So the two missions are really complementary. So we're going to fly together. Probe is launching tomorrow. Solar Orbiter is going to launch in about 18 months' time. And the two missions will fly together through the inner solar system close to the Sun. Probe will go really close to the Sun, as we've heard, very, very close indeed. Orbiter is slightly more shy. It's not going to go quite as close, but it's going to carry some telescopes as well. And so the two missions together will be able to take great pictures of the Sun, and we'll be able to look at what's happening on the Sun, and then we'll be able to measure what comes off the Sun with Probe and with Solar Orbiters as it flies past the spacecraft. So that's the kind of way that we'll be able to do the science to link what's happening on the Sun to what happens in space.
And bringing in Lucie as well. I mean, I suppose the challenge is obvious, the incredible heat. How do you engineer a vehicle, a probe, to survive this? Well, tell us something about the tech.
It is an enormous task to get something that close to the Sun. So even spacecraft that are at the distance of the Earth get heated up on the sun-facing side to over 100 degrees Celsius. Going to the proximity that Parker Solar Probe will reach, its sunward-facing side will heat up to over 1,000 degrees Celsius. So the NASA engineers had to create a very substantial heat shield, which is 4 inches thick. They've also had to tuck solar panels that power the craft behind this heat shield at certain points in its orbit. And it also has a water cooling system on board, because the sun-facing side will get incredibly hot, but the instruments behind the heat shield still need to operate at a few tens of degrees Celsius. So there's a remarkable difference in temperature between the outside and the inside.
Tim Horbury, tell us a little bit more about why we need to do this. I mean, we were chatting with David earlier about, well, because it's there and because we can. But in terms of how it might help our everyday lives or the way we operate here on Earth, what's the point?
Right. Well, this is a mission that people have wanted to fly since the late 1950s. It's been a long time coming. We know this is something we need to do because the Sun is so important to our lives on Earth. It drives all the life on Earth, but it also now affects our technology. So as we become more dependent on things that happen in space, satellite navigation, for example, we become more dependent on what the Sun does. And the Sun can actually release enormous amounts of matter and energy, and when they arrive at the Earth, they interact with the Earth's magnetic field, and they cause what we call space weather. And that's a whole range of effects. It can knock out satellites, it can be very dangerous to astronauts, but it can also damage power systems on the Earth, for example, and so on. So we want to understand how these things happen, how the Sun creates all these effects. And Solar Probe is all about understanding the fundamental science that drives space weather in interplanetary space and at the Earth.
Lucie Green, what's the timing here? What are the hopes for when we might start to, well, launch the probe successfully, hopefully, on Saturday, but when we might start to reap the rewards in terms of the data coming back?
I don't think it will be very long before we start to reap the rewards. So there will be a close approach to the Sun of 15 million miles just within a few months after launch, which is absolutely incredible. And because Parker has a series of instruments on board that sense and sift solar material from the Sun around the spacecraft, start to operate quite quickly. Measurements will be coming in within a few months. It's hugely exciting. Around the world will be, even though it's a NASA. So it won't be that long. And over 3 months and years, Parker Solar Probe will work its way into orbit, gets closer and closer to the Sun. Then it will reach a close distance of the edge of around 4 million kilometres. 4 million miles. And then it will be bedded in this atmosphere of the Sun that's called the corona.
Lucie, we're having a little bit of sound problems with your line, but I think we got the point you were making there, and I want to thank you for joining us from Perth. And coming back to Tim Horbury, another amazing fact about this probe is I think it's going to be the fastest man-made object ever.
That's right. So when it gets close to the Sun, it's going to be travelling really quickly. So we drop in towards the Sun and we speed up as we do that. So by the time it's really close to the Sun, it's going to be doing 170 kilometres a second. So to put that in context, if you went at that speed, you could do London to New York in about half a minute. So it's enormously quick, almost unimaginably fast. So, and naturally, it's a challenge as well for the spacecraft, so they've had to design various systems to cope with that as well. So, as Lucie says, it's an enormous engineering challenge to have built this spacecraft. We're only doing it now, finally, because we finally have the technologies to be able to do it after all of these years. So it's a very exciting mission.
And just very briefly, the fact that NASA is doing this, and at the European Space Agency, you're hoping to have your own coordinating mission. it is a golden age for space exploration.
I think it really is. And actually, this is almost one of the final things that we need to do in some sense to wrap it up. There's still an enormous amount still to do, but we've now been to every planet. We've been to asteroids. We've been to comets. It's extraordinary what's happening. And we've got things like the Hubble Space Telescope. There'll be another big telescope launching in a few years' time as well. So I think that's right. It's a glorious age for space exploration. And it's, for me personally, enormously exciting to be part of that. It's an enormous privilege to be part of a mission like this, and we're really looking forward to the science. The next few years, as Lucie says, when the data starts coming back, it's going to be fantastically exciting.
You have to come back and keep telling us about it, because I'm very excited about it too. Tim Horbury, thank you very much.